In Portland, Oregon, demonstrators lining the streets in protest of President Trump's mass deportation.
Portland, Oregon, long known for its creative energy, independent spirit, and activist culture, has become a city caught between frustration and fatigue. Over the past few years, public spaces once filled with music, food trucks, and festivals have too often turned into stages for unrest, confrontation, and exhaustion. The latest clashes in downtown Portland mark what may be the beginning of a new phase for a community, seeking both accountability and peace. What unfolded was chaotic and emotional. Demonstrators, counter-protesters, officers, and residents colliding in a swirl of noise, smoke, and confusion. Yet beneath the turmoil lay a deeper story about a city struggling to reclaim its balance and redefine its sense of safety and civic responsibility. The chaotic scene. On a cool October evening, the streets near the federal facilities in Portland were once again crowded with protesters. Many had come dressed in costumes, Halloween masks, and bright outfits that blurred the line between performance and protest. Music echoed through the night, chants mixed with laughter, and for a brief moment, it felt more like a festival than a confrontation. But tension simmered beneath the surface. As officers moved in to disperse the crowd after several reports of disorderly conduct, the scene shifted quickly from colorful to chaotic. Smoke filled the air, voices rose, and confusion spread. Law enforcement moves. Police and federal agents had been monitoring the gathering for hours. According to the department's later statements, their mission was to enforce existing city codes, blocking roadways, open containers, and public disturbances. When the first dispersal order came, few seemed to believe it would actually be carried out. Yet minutes later, tactical teams began moving down the street, launching pepper balls to push people back and create safe lanes of passage. Videos captured flashes of light and clouds of smoke rising over tents and makeshift barriers. Some protesters ran. Others stood their ground, shouting as the night filled with the echoes of sirens and shouted commands. The arrests. As officers advanced, several individuals were detained. One of them, known in activist circles for previous clashes, was quickly surrounded by onlookers, some of whom pleaded for calm while others taunted the police. The arrest unfolded in front of dozens of cameras. Footage later circulated online, showing officers pulling a person away from the crowd as smoke drifted around them. For a few tense minutes, the scene resembled a battlefield, people coughing, yelling, and pointing phones into the haze. Yet despite the intensity, no serious injuries were reported. A city on edge. Portland's recent years have been marked by tension between demonstrators, counter-protesters, and police. Protests that began as peaceful expressions of social justice often devolved into nightly standoffs. Businesses downtown boarded up their windows. Residents grew weary of the noise and fear. City leaders faced mounting criticism from both sides, some accusing them of over-policing, others of not acting decisively enough. The latest operation appeared to be the city's attempt to reassert control after months of disorder, signaling that the days of unchecked street takeovers might finally be ending. The homeless encampment conflict. Much of the confrontation centered around a long-standing encampment near the federal ICE building, an area that had become both a protest site and a refuge for Portland's unhoused population. Tents, makeshift kitchens, and donated supplies had filled the sidewalks. While activists described it as a humanitarian space, city officials and nearby residents saw it as a safety hazard. Propane tanks, piles of debris, and improvised electrical setups raised fears of fire or explosion. On the night of the raid, officers moved in to clear the area, asking residents to relocate their belongings. A difficult balance. The moment was raw. Some people wept as their few possessions were packed away. Others argued, insisting they had nowhere else to go. Officers tried to explain the city's policy, that camping in active sidewalks or near government buildings violated safety ordinances. But for those living there, the explanations rang hollow. "Where are we supposed to go?" one woman asked, her voice shaking. Her question echoed through the scene, unanswered. Volunteers from local charities offered to help transport belongings and connect people with shelters, but space was limited and tensions were high. Community frustration. As the night unfolded, counter-protesters appeared on the scene. some expressing support for law enforcement, others recording the chaos with their phones. Their presence added another layer of complexity to an already volatile environment. Shouts filled the air, accusations of bias, claims of brutality, and angry demands for accountability on all sides. Yet, amid the confrontation, there were also moments of humanity. A few bystanders helped older residents carry their belongings away from the camp. One officer knelt to calm a frightened dog tangled in a leash. In the middle of a volatile night, small acts of empathy flickered through the smoke. The aftermath. By dawn, the sidewalks were nearly empty. Where there had once been tents and banners, there were now piles of debris waiting for cleanup crews. The city's public works department arrived with garbage trucks and sweepers. Some of the remaining protesters lingered, watching silently as crews loaded what was left into dumpsters. For many, the scene symbolized the end of an era, the dismantling of a protest village that had become part of Portland's uneasy identity. Official response. In a press briefing the next morning, Portland police outlined their intentions. "We will be more actively enforcing laws related to disorderly conduct, blocking traffic, and open alcohol consumption," an officer said. "These are basic codes of public safety, not political statements." City officials echoed the sentiment, emphasizing that the goal was to restore order while still respecting the right to protest peacefully. They also promised additional resources for homeless outreach and cleanup efforts, acknowledging that long-term solutions would require more than nightly raids. Divided reactions. The public reaction was split. Supporters of the cleanup praised the move as long overdue, arguing that the city had been held hostage by small groups of agitators for too long. Others condemned the operation as heavy-handed and insensitive to the city's unhoused population. Social media filled with contrasting narratives. Videos of officers helping residents contrasted with clips showing people crying over lost possessions. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. Portland's ongoing attempt to navigate compassion and order without losing its soul. The role of counter-protesters. In recent months, new dynamics have emerged. Counter-protesters, local residents, small business owners, and civic activists have begun showing up to document and sometimes challenge the more extreme demonstrators. Some argue that their presence emboldens police to act, offering a sense of accountability and civilian oversight. Critics counter that it risks escalating tensions further. Whatever the interpretation, their visibility marks a shift. Portland's public square is no longer dominated by one side. It has become a contested space of multiple voices demanding to be heard. The broader struggle. The unrest in Portland is not isolated. It reflects a national reckoning over civil unrest, homelessness, and the limits of local government authority. Cities across the United States face similar struggles, balancing empathy with enforcement, reform with order. For Portland, the challenge is especially pronounced. Once seen as a model of progressive urban policy, it now stands as a case study in how quickly public confidence can erode when civic systems strain under pressure. Searching for common ground. In the days following the confrontation, community leaders from across the political spectrum called for restraint and dialogue. Faith groups organized food drives for displaced camp residents. Neighborhood associations hosted town halls, inviting both activists and police to speak. While disagreements remained sharp, a quiet consensus began to form. Portland's problems will not be solved by force or anger alone. The city needs sustained investment in housing, mental health care, and transparent communication between citizens and authorities. A city reclaiming itself. By the following week, the streets around the federal buildings were noticeably calmer. The tents were gone, graffiti removed, and traffic flowed again. For residents, it was a small but meaningful sign that the city might be starting to heal. Yet many also feared that without addressing root causes, poverty, addiction, political alienation, the peace would be temporary. Portland, they said, must rediscover its capacity for empathy without surrendering its sense of order. Lessons from the night. The night of the crackdown revealed two truths about modern urban life. The first is that law enforcement cannot single-handedly fix social breakdowns that took years to form. The second is that protest movements, however well-intentioned, risk losing their legitimacy when anger turns into aggression. Between those poles lies the space where community must rebuild itself, patiently, imperfectly, but together. Conclusion. The scenes from Portland were chaotic, emotional, and deeply symbolic. They showed a city wrestling with its conscience, trying to reconcile compassion with accountability. For some, the cleanup represented a long overdue restoration of civic order. For others, it was a painful reminder of inequality and displacement. Yet perhaps the most important takeaway is that the struggle for peace in Portland is not a battle between left and right, or between police and protesters. It's a test of whether a community can find common purpose after years of division. As the smoke cleared and the city's streets quieted, one truth remained. Portland's story isn't over. The next chapter will depend not on who shouts the loudest, but on who listens first.